Welcome back in to the Football Friday edition of Birds 365. Joined now by Paul Domowitch, Hall of Fame selector, longtime reporter of the Philadelphia Eagles, one of the best in the business. Dom, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Friday?
Doing well, guys. Hope you're doing the same.
Yeah, doing good. Big open practice at Lincoln Financial Field. What could possibly be better? Nearly 50,000. That's how they described it, Domo. I think they were fudging a little bit, but it's close. It's pretty amazing when you see that many people for an open practice. It's crazy, this fan base. Of course, they don't get to see practice like everybody else, so maybe that factors into it. But it was a big night for the offense, Damo, and that means it wasn't a big night for the defense. As the calendar turns to August, does it get a little bit more pressing? Because these linebackers, Damo, now that the pads are on, Howie's got to know something's up. He's got to. I can't believe he's happy with this group.
It's early. He'll, if he's going to make any changes, I think he'll wait a couple. He'll wait well into the preseason before he thinks about anything. I'm not as down on this group. You see them every day, so I don't. But I like Dean. I like Devin White.
Jacoby had a tough day with Kenny Gainwell. Kenny Gainwell ate him for lunch in the passing game. Vic broke his ankles, got him on a wheel route. Oh, it was ugly.
Vic will do what he did in Denver. He'll show the defense a film of Sam Mills, and the next thing you know, these guys will be playing out of their minds.
I hope that helps because, when the pads come on, and because I look, they'd look good in their pajamas, as Bobby King said, because Devin's really athletic and. But when the pads come on, Mekhi Becton's wiping people out, and Fred Johnson and Trevor Keegan with the second team wiped out the whole side. Landon Dickerson wasn't even out there. When that defensive front isn't keeping people off them, I think so much is dependent on that defensive front. It's going to be that or bust for the Eagles defense. If those guys don't show up every single week, it's going to be really difficult for that back seven. That's how I kind of look. Now it's August. That's what we do. August 1st, we overreact at this point. But Nick makes a big thing about these practices because he warms up like it's a game, and he's worried about the communication aspect between the coaches. So I think they put a lot of emphasis on this practice, and it was all good for the offense, but that means it's all bad for the defense. You can't have it both ways, and I think people want it both ways.
Yeah, and what would be more concerning right now, the offense stinking up the place or the defense?
Well, that's true. That's the positive spin.
Yeah. I think there's a feeling that the defense will eventually, find itself. And I agree. I mean, the defensive line, but it's not. It's always been about the defensive line. No matter who the coordinator's been, that's the way this team has built its defense. It's all about the pass rush. So now whether it's good enough, we'll find out. I mean, we don't know. We don't know about Smith. We don't, yet. We don't know about some of the other players. The guy they got from the Jets.
Bryce Huff hasn't. He almost got an interception, so he looked pretty good as a flat defender, but he hasn't shown much as a pass rusher. But maybe that's going against Lane Johnson.
Isn't there, guys? Isn't there? And I'll ask both of you this. Isn't there a consensus though where normally the offense starts a little bit behind the defense in terms of getting up to speed? You have two new coordinators. Normally the defense starts out a little ahead. Now, I guess you saw that in OTAs.
Yeah, saw it in the spring.
It's been offense. The defense has done nothing. I don't know if that's, something to be concerned about if you're saying that normally the defense starts a little bit ahead of the offense. That hasn't been the case here at all.
You got a new defense, right? I mean, these new players, you got an offense that, you know, should be the best, one of the best in the league. I mean, it has one of the
Yeah,
top
it's
two
true.
lines. It's got Saquon Barkley. It's got the MVP runner-up at quarterback. It's got probably the two best the best wide receiver tandem in the league, or at least one of the top three. I mean, it should be ahead of the defense right now. You know, especially considering what they have to prove after the pitiful way they played in those last 7 games last year. So, I mean, I'm not surprised the offense is outplaying the defense right now. And, you know, I mean, all the years I covered football, I can't remember who looked good in early August.
That's true.
Right, yeah,
That's
It
that's
means
true.
nothing. I mean, the only people it matters to is Howie and Nick, who have to figure out put together a roster by September 6th. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not
Well, people accuse me of being too negative all the time. So I guess I'll go to the positive. And the offense was tremendous. And the one thing I would say is they look like they're going to be way more open to different things in the red zone with Kellen Moore. I think that's a positive. I mean, Dallas Goedert looked like a monster last night. That the monster we've all been expecting over the years. And he's been a very good player, but I don't think he's taken that next step to where people put him next to Kittle and Andrews and those kinds of guys. And maybe it's just because he wasn't used correctly. Because, Kellen Moore's using, play action looks, naked bootlegs, and all of a sudden the big tight end's there against corners and open. He's just using his body, scored 3 touchdowns. Damo had a 2-point conversion at the end when they did a situational period when they were down 8. So they had to score the touchdown and get the 2-point conversion. And Dallas converted that. Boy, if he's unlocked in the red zone, that really opens up some things for this offense.
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned, many times on this show that, they've got to expand this offense. They can't, he can't rely totally on AJ Brown and Devontae Smith this year. And, he's got to use the tight end. He's got to use the backs. He's got to use that second tight end. So I think that's what we saw a glimpse of yesterday with Goddard. I mean, I think he can be a really, really, really good red zone threat and just change the whole dynamic of that offense.
Yeah, I think the other interesting side on the offense, obviously Dallas Goedert's very exciting, but is that wide receiver 3. You now have heard Nick talk about it. You heard Jalen bring up some guys yesterday in the press conference. Is a wide receiver 3 by committee approach a good idea, Damo? If you're thinking, I need speed here, I'll go to John Ross. I need red zone, I'll go to 6'7" Johnny Wilson. Is that a good approach, or is that something that might be destined to fail to do it that way?
No, I mean, you could do it. I'd rather have a go-to guy there, but with all the weapons they have, no matter who they had there, it's not going to be a guy that's going to catch 70 balls. So,
Yeah.
I think they'll be fine, regardless if any of those guys end up stepping up and really being big, big contributors because of the other weapons that they have.
Yeah, I'm not as worried about that because it's not, and Britton talked about this, and you're not going to be ball centric, is what he described it as. I mean, you're not getting a ton of traffic. It's so I can't get overly worried about it. I think Damo's right from the perspective of you don't want to be too predictable and show tendencies like Cubby's going to be in the slot and Wilson's going to be a fade guy, and people know what's coming. So you'd prefer to have the more well-rounded player. But as long as AJ and DeMonte are out there, who cares? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like it just make the play when it comes to you. That's what Quez didn't do enough.
Yeah.
Occasionally something's going to come for you and you got to make that play. Now, if AJ or DeMonte are out for a couple weeks, then I have more of an issue because then you need somebody to play outside, and I don't know if they have that player, but you can't have everything. I can't,
Yeah, and also, something that goes under the radar with slot receivers, good slot receivers, is their ability to block. Now, I don't know what this group who are the good blockers. But
Well, I think they hope Johnny Wilson's going to be because of his
Yeah.
size, but
Everybody else is undersized.
Yeah.
John Ross isn't big, obviously, and Britton Covey.
Eric Campbell.
I don't think Britton Covey's
Britton's
blocking
not,
anybody.
Yeah. Sometimes, you don't have to be a big guy to be able to block effectively in that spot.
Look at Devontae Smith. He's a great blocker.
John Ross to be knock anybody down. So
yeah, Puka Nacua was a really good blocker as a rookie because he's willing. So yeah, and he's a good friend of Britton Covey's, by the way. They work out together in the off season. So and Britton's been a guy I've said pretty consistently. He gets a ton of separation. So if they want to go in that traditional, when people think of the Welkers and the Edelmans and those types of guys, and it was interesting pregame. They had him working out with the tight ends, running those option routes, Britton Covey. So maybe that's something to keep an eye on, that they could potentially use that. I think Kellen Moore's more open to getting everybody involved, but then I look at that other. They always say good problem to have, Damo, but there's still the word problem exists in good problem, and I start to look at it and I say, AJ, Devontae, Dallas, Saquon, Kenny looks tremendous as a receiver. I can't say enough good things about him early in camp. Grand Calcaterra's improved. Now you want Campbell or Ross or Covey involved. Boy, yeah, that's a good problem, but it is a problem.
Yeah, I guess, but it's a problem I'd rather have than the other way.
Well, that's true too. Yeah. We got optimistic, Paul. I like it.
I just look at last year, and they just became so. Jalen became so narrow in what he was looking at. He just
he did.
AJ
and that's part on him. Let's be honest.
Absolutely. Yeah,
he fell in love with the big play. I think.
Yeah,
I think that was it.
Yeah, and the question you've asked and we've talked about is whether he can change, and I think he can because he knows, he's smart enough to know it didn't work last year down the stretch when teams took away AJ. So he knows, I think, and Kellen Moore's drumming it into his head for months that spread the ball around.
Yeah, and that's Kellen Moore's style. So I think it's going to work well with Jalen. He's a smart offensive coordinator. My biggest question with Kellen is not any of the offensive concepts. I think he's going to be great with all that, as he has been in the past. Is he going to know how to use it with the skill set he has at quarterback? It's Jalen Hurts. He's unique. He's not the passer he had in Dallas with Dak Prescott. So how does he incorporate that into the offense would be my biggest question with Kellen Moore. But overall, I think we've seen a lot of very good, promising things coming out of camp. I think the offense is in a good spot to have a good year. Damo, the question for me would be, will they reach the expectation? Because we look at last year in a negative light. They were still the 8th ranked offense in the NFL. Yeah. Will they be able to surpass that and reach the expectations coming into the year?
Yeah. Well, when you split up last year into those first 11 games, last 7, it's just dramatic. First 11 games, I think they were in scoring. They probably were a top 4 team, averaging more than 26, 27 points a game. Yeah. Last 7, they averaged 18 points a game. They just couldn't put it in the end zone. So that's obviously got to change. I think that's what they're looking at when they're looking for improvement this year is what they did wrong in those last 7 games.
Yeah, and that that'll always be. It's such an outlier, Damo. You've been covering this game for a long time. To have a 10-1 team that went through that. Not only that, they went through that stretch of it was the best stretch in Eagles history, 29-32. I think it was at one point. They were just winning games. And that's a trait. I remember talking to Denny Green about that back in the day, saying he told me winning is a habit. and it became a habit to the Eagles. And all of a sudden, poof, gone. I don't think we'll ever fully know what went wrong because and think about the games in that collapse. If they win that Seattle game, if they just show the patience and go down the field and win that game, if they beat Arizona, which they were scoring some points there, but the defense just was a disaster. I think maybe it stems the tide, but we'll never know. I still to this day have trouble explaining exactly what went on. And you start thinking about like who played well over that span. It was almost like a universal collapse, player to player. I've never seen anything like it.
You know, the man that should be able to explain explicitly what happened last year, because he's retired now and has no reason not to tell the story, is Jason Kelce. And even Jason can't, you know, I still have yet to hear Jason explain it.
I don't think he knows. I don't
think
anybody knows. I think
Jason's one of the smartest guys I've ever covered. And if he can't explain what happened last year, who can?
Yeah, I think it was, you know, you get in a rut and sometimes it's confidence and everything goes against you and it just feels like you can't turn it around. Sometimes I'm sure everybody's experienced that in their own life one way or another, you know, to a lesser extent. And I think that's what happened last year. I think they've all moved on. I think the energy of the practices so far seems like they're ready to put it in the past and get back to where they were in 22 and even early 2023. And, you know, I'm confident they're going to move on from it, to be honest. But you're right. It is weird what happened last year.
Yeah.
Offensive line, which I think is going to be really good.
Mm-hmm.
But I got to tell you, everybody's banged up already. I don't like that from the perspective of Landon's already had a lacerated toe. Now he's got a knee injury. Tyler Steen's out with an ankle. Lane has been dealing with a toe issue. Brett Toth had a hamstring. They had a difficult time with the second team center, and they're moving people around. All these little nicks. You've seen it over the years, Damo. The quickest way to having an underwhelming season is to have multiple injuries on the offensive line. Are you concerned? The Eagles brought in another veteran interior player this week, Nick Gates, who's, you know, started a lot of games, decent player, limited ceiling. They got like three of these guys. They got Matt Hennessy. They got Max Sharping. They all have starting experience. They all are okay, but they're not great. Does that tell you anything? Why are they bringing in so many of these guys?
Because Howie's been there before where, you know, go back to 2020. I mean, 40 missed games by his offensive line, and it spelled disaster. Would they finish 5? They won for 4 games that year, 4-12.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he knows what can happen, and he knows there's no rhyme or reason for it. And the only thing you can do is make sure that you have as much depth and as much experience as humanly possible behind these guys in case they get hurt. And, you know, he's got some, you know, I mean, Lane Johnson's still one of the best right tackles, one of the best offensive tackles in the league. But because of his age, injuries are something you got to watch out for with him. Same thing, you know, Jordan Mailata has been hurt in his career. You know, it's just a sport that, you know, where attrition happens, and you better have guys that can step up and play. So, I mean, I think that's why he's going to keep bringing in veterans. You know, what I think this guy started like 29 games in his
yeah.
So, I mean, that's somebody you can plug in if you have to.
Yeah.
What's your thought, Damo, on the whole Mekhi Becton at right guard thing? He's a guy that's played tackle really his entire life. He's looks like a tackle. He plays like a tackle. You know, is that something you think will work well? I mean, it's a tough. I think it's a tougher swing than people think. You know what I mean? Going from tackle to the inside, especially when you're that big of a player. What do you think of Becton at right guard?
I mean, I haven't seen him in person play inside. You know, I think you're right. You know, I mean, there was a time when bigger guys never played inside. You know, it's too easy to get under their pads. But, you know, they've done well with, you know, Landon Dickerson playing in. You know, I mean, he's turned into I think they like the idea of having monsters inside. So,
Yeah, well, I think part of it with Kelsey over the years, if you think about the Brandon Brooks dynamic, was Kelsey's undersized, then you have the big 6'5" guard to kind of protect him a little bit. Same thing with Cam. I think they're thinking about. But I asked Jalen that yesterday, about Mekhi, because I said, Landon's 6'6". They list him as 6'6", so he's a big guard.
Yeah.
Mekhi's 6'8", 6'7" and 3/4, I think officially, but boy, he looks a hell of a lot bigger than Landon Dickerson. So I asked Jalen, I go, is that a thing, or do we make too much of it when it comes to your sight lines? And Jalen, I think, is much more comfortable on Zoom, and he gives like good answers. He gave a good answer. He's like, oh, it's a thing. I mean, that guy blocks out the sun.
Yeah.
So if you're, and I will say this, and probably there's somewhere, and you'll probably see it at some point, Damo. There was one play last night where Mekhi Becton got his hands on somebody, on one of the defensive tackles, and pushed him and blew up the whole line from that point forward inside. Kenny Gainwell had a huge hole, scored a touchdown. You could have, all I could describe it as was Mekhi Becton opened up a Mekhi Becton sized hole. It was massive.
Yeah.
So when he gets his hands on people, I can see why the Eagles are intrigued by it. But boy, you mentioned it's tough for those guys to get their pads low.
Yeah.
And those good defensive tackles, they're going to take advantage of that leverage game. So I'm not completely sold on that. It's going to be interesting, though.
I'm also curious, I mean, the tush push is such a big part of their offense, their ability to go for it on fourth down. How Becton factors into that. I mean, do they think, without Kelsey in the middle, Kelsey's ability to get leverage on people was a key to why that was so successful. And Dickerson's was a big part of it, but the right guard is too. And I'm wondering if they think Becton can be because of his ability to push people back, might be a guy that would do well in that. I don't know. Just a thought.
Yeah, and Cam Jurgens kind of got to see it up close with how Kelsey did. I'm not saying he's going to do it just like Kelsey, but at least he was right there next to him last year, to see it. Now you add a guy like Becton, who, as you mentioned, can plow anybody backwards. Yeah. Maybe the tush push.
I say all the time, I don't think Cam's going to get to steal the half yard like Jason could. He manipulate the football and take a half yard, which was reputation and that kind of thing. But I've always said, Damo, better than anybody, the Eagles were the best quarterback sneak team in the league with Carson Wentz. I mean, they've been good at the quarterback sneak, tush push or not, for a very long time. And a lot of that had to do with Jason Kelsey. So we'll see how that progresses. But with Jalen Hurts, I'm not concerned with the quarterback sneak.
One of the things, you look at the number of times, I forget the numbers, I don't have them in front of me, on the tush push last year, but an inordinate amount of them were like 3rd and 2. They were able to, it became a situation where it was no problem getting 2 yards.
You were like close, they were doing it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So,
Nick
at one point said it's 1st and 9 for us, basically. So, if they're going to go for it. And
to Damo's point, it was really like 1st and 8.5.
Yeah. And that's why I didn't even like the stats, because sometimes the Eagles would be 3rd and 2, and they know they're going to go for it. So, they were okay getting a yard and then getting a yard on 4th down. So ultimately, to me, that's success. To others, it was viewed as not a success when you don't get it. But that was the plan. So Nick's like, all right, we're going to go for it, so we can, even if we don't get it on 3rd down, we're going to get it on 4th down. So
and that's big. I was watching the last episode of Receiver on Netflix yesterday.
Yeah.
The NFC Championship game with the 2 4th downs that Campbell had, and because Campbell all year went for it on 4th down. The Eagles, they were successful. fourth down against the 49ers.
They fell apart. Yeah.
And it ended up being the difference in the game. So, I mean, it's a huge, it can end up being a huge factor.
And the Eagles were #1, I believe, in fourth down offense last year. So it's tough to go up. It's tough to improve on that for Kellen Moore, at least.
Exactly.
That one statistic.
The other thing to watch too is I know I'm pretty confident they're going to be able to do it this year. But if you go back to even Carson Wentz, he was very successful. John, you've pointed this out in the quarterback sneak. The only common denominator of the eras was Jason Kelsey. And now he's gone. So I'm not saying it's going to be gone without Jason.
Well, I would say,
Carson
was a big dude, and Jalen is a strong. There's not too many quarterbacks that can squat 600 pounds. So they were a big part of it as well. Kelsey was, but I've always said when people were complaining and worried about the NFL banning the tush push, which ultimately they didn't do, I said constantly to Jody, I said, I don't care. They can ban it. They're still going to be successful because they were successful before that. As long as Kelsey and Jalen Hurts were there, they're going to be successful with the quarterback sneak, period. And that's why I wasn't that worried about it. And they were successful with Carson. And ultimately, we have to see how Cam handles it, but Jalen's still Jalen. He can still, he's still a fullback playing quarterback, as you say, Damo. He's getting it way more often than most quarterbacks.
And, I don't know where Kellen stands in this, but, last year we saw a few times where, they ran plays off that. They pitched out. I mean, and they had success with it. I'll be curious this year if they kind of expand that. Or what they do with it. I mean, there's so many things you can, that's a great thing about this game. I mean, there's always a new wrinkle that you can throw at somebody that they're not looking for when you think they pretty much know what you're going to do.
Back to the defense and the corners, because I think it's been mainly positive with the young corners, and it should be. But I do think there's going to be some hiccups, and they didn't have a great night last night. Nobody did defensively. But, Ringo's not going to be an all-pro day one. Rodgers isn't going to be an all-pro. Quinyon Mitchell's looked very good, but all rookies have some growing pains. Overall, though, I think you saw when they brought in – this is interesting. It was interesting to me, Damo. When they brought in Nick Gates, they cut Mario Goodrich, who actually did him a solid, because instead of waiting to the 53 and 1,100 players on the waiver wire, they put him on waivers. The Giants claimed him. I think they were 6th on the list, so he'll get an opportunity to compete where he's not the 13th guy on the depth chart. So he made the 53. That was like a big story last year. And now he didn't make it to August 1st. I think that speaks of the depth that the Eagles have at corner versus last season. Not that it's going to be all great, but Howie has really improved this team.
Yeah. I mean, with the two rookies, Rodgers, that was a great signing, picking him up when he was suspended for gambling.
Yeah, that really was.
Those are the kind of moves that, he's always been, signing guys in December off of practice squads, for the following year. Howie's good. Howie's always looking ahead. I memean, he's made a share of mistakes, but he's also, been a very astute in a lot of moves like that. So, yeah, they certainly have more depth. It's gonna come down to how well those rookies play and how much they contribute. But even if they're slow in developing, they've got people like Ringo and others, Rodgers, that can hold the fort for a while. But I think those two guys are going to be really good by the time you look at midseason. I think both of them are going to be big factors in that defense.
What's going on with the rest of the GMs in this league, Damo? Like, you spend $1 million for Isaiah Rodgers and you got to wait a year.
Yeah.
And everybody else is like, we'll talk about it when he's reinstated. And the Eagles say, we'll sign him and just let him sit. What is that, Jeffrey? Are these other owners so backward that they're like, I mean, because let's face it, $1 million in the NFL is nothing.
Yeah.
Or every GM just, no.
I think some of those guys still can't get over the fact that, I mean, you know, gambling is illegal. Okay. I mean, he was suspended, but I mean, I think there was a stigma that some owners said, well, you know, we're not going to sign that guy. You know, it just looks bad and our fan base won't like it. And that's not the case anymore. I mean, you know, it's, you know, he made a stupid mistake, but it's not Pete Rose. I mean, sports gambling's legal in what, 38 states now.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just a smart, you know, I mean, how he's looking deeper at some of these guys. I mean, he you know, he investigates. He has Dom and other people check their character. And if he feels that this isn't going to happen again, and this guy is going to, you know, be determined to get over the mistake and prove to people that he can play, he's going to sign him. And it was a terrific signing.
How he plays that big picture game. I love the analogy. You know, everybody else is playing checkers, and how he's playing chess, just sitting back, moving the pieces. You know, he really does a good job of that.
Well, I do think, and how he gives. I do think Jeffrey's a big part of that, because Jeffrey allows him to be proactive. Jeffrey allows him to make mistakes. Other GMs don't have that kind of rope,
and he's got the job security. I mean, that we talk about. Yeah.
Well, you better make some good moves after not taking Justin Jefferson. So.
And he did. To be fair, yeah, he did. He rebounded good.
That one didn't work out, boy. But you know, everybody. Justin Jefferson's a phenomenal player. I mean, you know, to me, he's the best receiver in football. Yeah. But you know, if you make the right decision with Justin Jefferson, on that year, and you don't get
DeMonte.
You don't get DeMonte. You don't get AJ. You probably get neither.
Yeah.
And maybe you're not as good as a football team. There's so many butterflies, and that's no criticism of Jefferson, because, like I said, he's just one of the best. He hit the ground running. He's such a good route runner. It's like everything about him. There's nothing not to like about him, but he would have been so good here. You wouldn't have been looking for other receivers. And,
you know, I think sometimes when you make a mistake like that, it forces you to open your eyes and consider possibilities that you might not otherwise have thought about, like, you know, trading for AJ and trading up to get Devontae. So. Yeah, you're right. I mean,
I was giving him credit on another show, and somebody ripped me. He was like, "Well, congrats, you're giving him credit for fixing mistakes." I'm like, every GM.
Well, everybody makes mistakes.
That's what I mean. I'd rather have the GM that can look at it, understand it, and then go and fix it. But talking about the GM, let's go to this super chat here, and we talked a little bit about the linebackers. But D Love says, "I don't feel comfortable with the Eagles linebackers this year, knowing that was a big weakness last year. Is that Howie's biggest failure this offseason?" We just talked about all the good with Howie. Dama, what are they going to do about the linebacker position here? Are they going to go and get somebody before the season, or will they enter the year with the guys they have and be comfortable with it?
I mean, I think they're going to give it more time. I mean, they like Dean. I would imagine Fangio likes Dean. So
I'd like N'Kobe.
Yeah, you know, he's just a matter of staying healthy more so than anything else. I mean, I thought before training camp started that this was a pretty good group. I mean, they had depth. I mean, Burks gives them a nickel guy that can cover. You know, White and Dean, I thought were going to be, you know, pretty good, solid pair of starters. So, I mean, I'm not ready to panic yet.
I'm on the Ben Van Sumeren bandwagon. First of all, he's a tremendous special teams player. And few pay attention to special teams drills. I'm a lunatic. So he's just a monster on special teams, on those reps. So, and he seems to be somewhat instinctive. They threw him into the deep end last year at the end of the season, and the whole knock on him, the reason he didn't get drafted, he had phenomenal testing numbers. He's a great athlete. He didn't play much in college, and everybody said how raw he was, and he just showed like a natural affinity for playing the position. I'm probably jumping the gun, and I'm partially jumping the gun because I don't have confidence in the veteran linebackers for the most part. But I said this, and I want to throw it at you, Damo, and at P Damo, make sure you follow Damo on X, and read him at the 33rd team. But I say it's defaulting to White and Nakobe Dean, and if you have a bunch of injuries and down the road you're forced to play, say, Trotter and Van Sumeren, I don't think there would be that much difference.
Yeah.
So I think their whole linebacker, I don't think there's that much difference between 1 and 6. And Burks, you mentioned Burks, he hasn't even practiced. He got hurt in the first practice. So if he doesn't get back healthy, he's going to have a tough time making this team. But I think from 1 through 6, they're going to get pretty much the same accomplishment.
Yeah.
Which is, maybe it's good.
And if that's the case, then why not just go with Jeremiah Trotter Jr., who you have under contract for 4 years?
I mean, I'm jumping the gun a little bit because you need a little bit. But I think if they were forced to play him, I don't think it would he's very instinctive.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I mean. And you said he's very similar to Nakobe Dean in a skill set standpoint. I mean,
yeah.
Nakobe's in year 3. I don't know if it's that close, I'd probably just go with the young guy, but maybe, or Jeremiah and Devin White, and go from there, but maybe they're not.
And that's why I'm big on instincts at linebacker, Damo. I don't know if you are, but that's why I like Nakobe and Trot, because they're very instinctive players. Like, I think if you start making those false steps at linebackers, at linebacker, it doesn't matter how athletic you are. I mean,
you're not getting
4-4 can turn into 4-8 and 4-9 real quick with one false step.
Yeah.
And if you're going the right direction all the time, and I think that's what Nakobe does when he's healthy and playing, and Trot has shown that. Ben's shown it a little bit, a natural part of it. Is that, I mean, you wrote the book on Sam Mills. Is that how you always looked at linebacker play? Because I'm big on instincts.
I mean, Sam learned in high school. He had one of the great high school coaches of all time, a guy named Frank Glazier, who he taught him the triangle, which is reading the guards and reading the running back. And after that, Sam had it beat. I mean, he was one of the great anticipatory linebackers I've ever seen play. I mean, he knew where the ball was going, in addition to all his talent, and the fact that he could, people couldn't see him when he'd come through that hole. I mean, he just knew he could diagnose plays like nobody I've ever seen. And, and Vic, I think Vic will take a lot of that and teach it to Nakobe, to Trotter, to White. And I think, this group won't look as lost as they did last year at the end. I mean, I think these guys will know where they're supposed to be, whether they have the physical tools to get there and cover, we'll see. But, I just kind of right now, I have a confidence that Vic will get this linebacking crew straight.
And Vic, we trust. I said, and to me, this whole offseason is about, all right, we let's build up. We got an all-star team on offense, and Vic will figure it out on defense. That's been sort of, I think, the mindset. To your point, though, I love watching those NFL films mic'd up of Kuechly, Luke Kuechly, Dama.
Yeah.
He's calling out every play. He knows every damn play of the opposition, every single one.
Yeah, that's a key for a great linebacker is to, if you can anticipate where it's going, you're ahead of the game. You don't have to have 4.5 speed.
Yeah. The great Pete Damo, he's got 4.5 speed still at this point on his fastball. And we'll congratulate Merrill Reese. I forgot to congratulate Merrill Reese.
Yeah. I'm so happy for him.
Yeah.
Me too.
We all are. The great play-by-play announcer, honored by the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame game, of course, was They had to call it off for weather, but who
Okay.
cares? Did you see any of the kickoffs? I didn't see because I was down in practice. Any weird things? Did you see any?
I saw a couple of them, and other than the fact that nobody was moving until it was caught,
Yeah.
it was basically
Same
the same result. So.
Yeah, they got it out to the 26. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm like,
Hey, it's better. At least they're returning it. At least,
yeah, I think what
hopefully.
you said there, John, is going to start to happen. I think there's going to
Yeah,
be
touchbacks, yeah.
more touchbacks than people.
Not as much of a penalty. They were trying to kick it out to the 35, but nobody would pass the rules. So if that was the penalty, so they moved it back to the 30. And I think one good kick return, I'm saying, all right, I'll give up the extra 5 yards, and people will just kick it out. I think that's what's going to happen, but we'll see. Something to keep an eye on. Thanks, Damo. Great as usual. Make sure you follow him at pdamo on x.com.
Damo, thanks for joining the show, man.
Take care. Have a good weekend.
There's Paul Domowitch joining us on Birds 365. Good stuff from Paul Domowitch. Coming up in about 15 minutes or 16 minutes, we'll have Ed Kratz. He's been covering the practices with Johnny Mack. So he's a guy who's been there live and in person. We will get his takeaways on what he saw. He's a guy who, he liked Nakobe Dean in the offseason. We'll see how he's thinking, what he's thinking about Nakobe, what he's seen, and plenty more from Ed Kratz coming up. And then real quick, John, before we get to a break, let's go to our man Prince, who dropped us a super chat. Prince, thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Prince says, if we had drafted Jefferson, we would have also drafted Micah. Well, that's a perfect world, Prince. I don't know if the cookie would have crumbled.
They had no interest in Micah, but I mean, if people are always go back to drafts and you do the best player available. The Micah draft, the Eagles were focused on basically was a group of 4 players. Devontae was the last 4. They were hoping one of them would drop to where they were. Devontae was the last one. And they knew the Giants were going to take him at number 11, I believe. I might be off on the numbers. And they had to jump them. And they actually... the Cowboys were comfortable coming down. It was interesting because it was NFC East. And they wanted Micah, and they knew they could drop down. They knew the Eagles wanted an offensive player. They knew the Giants wanted an offensive player. So they were very comfortable with it. That was never in the Jefferson. What is angers people about the Jefferson pick is the scouting staff wanted Jefferson, and the coaches wanted Rager to bring both a horizontal and vertical stretching of the field into the equation. They thought Jalen could do that. But while I say, now it seems comical because Jalen turned into Jalen Rager. Look, he was going to get picked by New Orleans. I forget the number. They were 2 or 3 picks behind it wasn't like this crazy. Oh, nobody thought that. A bunch of people thought Jalen Rager could play, not just the Philadelphia Eagles. So that part is revisionist history.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see. I'm going to move on, obviously, from I don't know what year that was, John. What was it, like 2020, I guess?
And it runs together. This is
right. It was the Jalen Hurts draft, wasn't it?
This was Devontae's. This is Devontae's.
It was the Jalen Hurts draft because Jalen was taken in the 2nd round, and it was Jalen Rager who was taken in the 1st round that year. I'm pretty sure I have that right. So I think that was 2020.
2021.
2021 they took Jalen Rager?
2021 is the Devontae draft. I thought that's what we were talking about.
No, yeah. Well, Devontae
was Micah Parsons draft.
Yeah, okay, got it. Yeah.
Which was that was 2021. And what happened, and interestingly, because the Giants wanted a receiver, they were at 11 and they traded out with Chicago, who took Justin Fields, and they traded down once they weren't able to get Devontae Smith, and they ended up taking Kadarius Toney, which did not work out for them. Hurt the Eagles in the Super Bowl, but he's not been a good player overall. So the Giants doing Giants things, and the Cowboys, like I said, for all the criticism of the Cowboys, they generally do a very good job in the draft part of it. Will McClay is one of the best personnel people in the NFL. And yeah, I mean, the Eagles are happy with Devontae and the Cowboys are happy with Micah. So worked out for both of those.
Let's get to our next commercial break. As I mentioned, everybody coming up in about 12 and a half minutes. We'll have Ed Kratz, who's been down there covering. Excited to talk to Ed. He's like my comedic relief on the show. I think Ed brings such a funny element, but he covers the team phenomenally. But he's just a funny guy, Ed Kratz, and I love getting him on for that comedic relief on the show. So interesting to see what he has to say about practice and what he's seen so far at training camp. Before I do that, I want to tell all of you guys about our newest sponsor here on Birds 365. We are proud to welcome BetUS to the network, who will be sponsoring this show and the National Football Show here on JAKIB Sports all season long. So we appreciate BetUS for coming on. I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about it. I will bring them up on the screen. See, when you click the link down in our description, this is what you will see. You can click Bet Now, sign up, register. There is a lot of great sign-up bonuses, which I'll tell you about right now. Are you looking for a new sports book this football season? BetUS is the answer, and JAKIB Sports is proud to announce our new football partnership for the upcoming football season with BetUS. Right now, receive a 125% sign-up bonus up to $2,000, and I love this one, up to a 200% sign-up bonus if you deposit using crypto. So great stuff there. If it's good for former Birds quarterback Michael Vick, it's definitely good for JAKIB Sports. Let me tell you a little bit more about BetUS, guys. The fastest payouts in the industry. They have a 24/7 personalized service, so you will get your own personal account manager, which is awesome stuff. And then you can get 10% back on your net losses twice a year. So a little bit of relief there if you don't go on the winning side of things. Obviously, we talked about our Saquon Barkley jersey giveaway. Well, we're going to be doing the prop bets here on BetUS all year long. And for those who don't know about the giveaway, anytime Saquon goes over 125 yards, all-purpose yards, that is, that's rushing and receiving, we're going to give away one Saquon jersey to a channel member. You must be a channel member to be eligible to win the jersey. So we're going to be doing the prop bets on BetUS all season long. We're very excited.
And it's yards from scrimmage. As Jeff Kerr, our anal friend, said, yards from scrimmage, because all-purpose.
What's the difference?
In case Saquon returns a kickoff, that would not, you got.
So is that the only difference, though?
Yeah, that's the only difference.
All right. Well, we're going rushing, receiving, so we can call it yards from scrimmage. Same thing. Yeah. But as you mentioned, Jeff Kerr points that out. But great stuff there. We're going to be excited to follow that along. There's a lot of other stuff on BetUS that we'll continue to dive into, but very excited to welcome them onto the channel. BetUS, the newest partner, the newest sponsor here on Birds 365. We thank them for their support. So let's get to our next commercial break. Johnny Mack and I will kick around a couple other things. I want to talk about Mekhi Becton with John McCollum. We'll do that next on Birds 365.
Michael Vick at BetUS.com. Catch an incredible 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits, plus 10% gambler's insurance. BetUS, my online sportsbook and casino.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.